It started like any other day, calm skies, bustling streets, life moving as usual. But without warning, everything changed. The sky didn't just darken, it split open, and something breathtaking came through. Not a storm, not a trick of the weather, but something ancient, something divine. Witnesses looked up and saw what appeared to be angels in the sky, radiant and undeniable. What happened next didn't just leave a mark on the city, it shook the soul of the entire nation. If you think this was just a strange weather event, think again. You need to see what followed. Let's take a closer look.
Although many have heard the sound, no one can seem to explain the source.
In the moments after the impossible event had unfolded, while people were still reeling, trying to grasp what their minds could barely contain, a new phenomenon swept across the skies. It wasn't violent like a siren, nor sudden like thunder. Instead, it was a sound that seemed ancient, stretching across the heavens, a deep, low groaning, as if a colossal horn had been blown from the very edge of eternity itself. It rolled over the cities and fields with a force that wasn't just heard, but felt, pressing against the atmosphere, vibrating through the bones of every living thing. For nearly 20 minutes, this sound echoed across the world, and no one could find its source. People stepped out of buildings, wandered into fields, and gathered in city squares, looking upward with an unshakable compulsion. Some clutched their ears, others simply stood frozen, their eyes wide, hearts pounding with a nameless awe. They were searching, though they did not know for what, until the skies themselves began to shift. At first, it was subtle, the clouds moving strangely, shimmering like veils being drawn aside. And then, without warning, the sky was filled with them. Angels, countless beyond counting, stretching across the horizon. Some were vast, their wings so immense they seemed to brush the edges of the earth itself. Others were smaller, glowing figures moving in great formations, weaving patterns that pulsed with sacred light. The clouds, once innocent and white, began to change color. Slowly, dreadfully, they darkened into a deep, heavy red, the color of dried blood. It wasn't the crimson of a sunset or the orange glow of a wildfire. It was something darker, more ancient, as if the heavens were bleeding, bearing witness to something momentous. Meteorologists scrambled for explanations, issuing frantic updates that quickly descended into stunned silence. Their instruments could not explain what was unfolding. Science had no language for this, but the human heart did. It knew. Deep down, everyone knew. Something sacred had been disrupted. Something holy had been torn open, and the heavens themselves had come alive to testify. And through it all, the angels remained, some solemn and still, others moving through the skies like living prayers, their faces unreadable, their presence undeniable. There were no booming voices, no celestial proclamations in words, but every man, woman, and child felt it as clearly as if it had been shouted from the mountaintops. This was no longer a world of predictable seasons and reliable laws. A cosmic order had been broken, and the agents of heaven, the angels of the Most High, were bearing witness. While the skies burned with this eerie, blood-red glow and the ranks of angels remained hovering, the earth beneath them began to fracture in ways that defied understanding. It began with strange technical failures. Airplanes vanished from radar screens. Flight paths veered inexplicably off course. Communication between pilots and towers was cut without warning. Yet what made it more chilling was the absence of panic. The final transmissions were not screams of terror, but strange, reverent whispers. Some pilots spoke of seeing beings of light within their cockpits, tall, radiant figures that filled the space with a holy stillness before silence took over. On the ground, fires erupted, not like the wildfires people had grown used to, but in ways that seemed deliberate, almost surgical. Flames bent unnaturally around trees and raced across landscapes as though guided by an unseen hand. Eyewitnesses swore they saw figures walking through the fires, angels clothed in flame, untouched and serene, as if overseeing the burning with sorrowful authority. Then, where there should have been warmth, came an unnatural cold. Frost descended on cities that had basked in sunlight only hours before. Hospitals were filled with creeping mist. Vents began exhaling icy breaths, despite no mechanical cause. Electronic systems froze, not with a surge, but as if time itself had stumbled. Those who felt the chill claimed they saw, just at the edge of their vision, white-winged guardians passing through the mist, silent, purposeful, holy. Even the natural world was not spared. Birds fell from the sky, not in terror but frozen mid-flight, as if suspended between two worlds. Along the coastlines, whales beached themselves en masse, moving together with eerie coordination, as if obeying a command too deep for human ears to hear. These were not isolated disasters. They were not accidents of nature. They were a synchronized response, as if all of creation had suddenly become aware of the same truth, and the angels moved among it all, unseen by some, undeniable to others, their luminous forms flickering through skies and fields, coasts and forests. The land, the sea, the sky, they were no longer just backdrops to human life. They had become living participants in something vast, something sacred, something terrifyingly real. And the angels, silent witnesses to heaven's decree, were everywhere. In the days that followed, the sky did not return to normal. Instead, it became even more astonishing. Phenomena erupted across the heavens, lights moving with intelligence, defying physics and expectation. They would appear suddenly, flashes of brilliance, shifting in impossible geometries, before disappearing into the blood-red haze. Observers around the world, whether in bustling cities or isolated farms, reported seeing entire hosts of angels arrayed above them. Some described figures with swords of light, others weeping beings whose tears seemed to fall like silver rain. They moved in vast formations, their presence vibrating in the very air, overwhelming the senses with a mix of fear, awe, and inexplicable hope. No radar could track them. No scientist could explain them. No government could control them. Because what had begun was beyond human power. It was something ancient, something holy, breaking into the ordinary world. The angels had been summoned by the tearing open of sacred boundaries. They were not here to destroy, nor to reassure. They were here to witness, to stand guard over a world entering an unknown and fearsome chapter. And all humanity could do was watch, heads lifted to the red-stained heavens, as the angels filled the sky. As the skies stayed blood-red and strange lights continued to appear, social media exploded with reactions. People across the world posted videos and short messages, many struggling to find words for what they witnessed.
It felt like something holy was passing right over us. I'll never forget that sound. This wasn't weather. This was something sent to wake us up.
Alongside the flood of quick posts, longer essays began to emerge. Two popular essays argued that angels were clearly behind the events. One, titled "The Trumpets of Heaven," claimed the deep sounds were angelic horns, signaling a divine warning. The writer said the changing skies and unnatural fires were signs that angels were already intervening in human history. However, not everyone agreed. Another, "Hidden Technologies at Work," suggested that human-made experiments with weather or sound could explain everything, warning against rushing to religious conclusions without evidence. Regardless of the debates, one truth remained. No one could deny that something had shaken the earth and left a permanent mark on every heart that saw it.
Mystery in the sky. We're searching for answers after something shot across the sky this morning.
What separated these lights from ordinary phenomena wasn't just their beauty or mystery, it was the precision with which they moved. They hovered in silence over churches, rivers, and remote fields, pulsing in intricate, coordinated patterns, moving not randomly, but with intelligence and purpose. It became clear to many that these weren't just lights, they were beings, angels, revealed for those willing to see. Everywhere they appeared, the air seemed to hold its breath. Sound itself dulled, and an unexplainable stillness settled over the land, as though creation itself was watching. Then, one evening in Oklahoma, the skies changed once more. For days, a red haze had hung in the atmosphere, unsettling, yet mesmerizing. Suddenly, it parted, and through the gap came not a streak, not a blur, but a figure, a man, radiant, undeniable in form, hovering calmly in the air. He was surrounded by a host of glowing beings, brilliant and unmistakably angelic. Those who witnessed the sight wept openly or collapsed in awe. There was no confusion about who this central figure resembled. It was the very image carried for centuries in stained glass windows and paintings, but now alive, present, not as myth, but as reality. Angels circled him in patterns that spoke not of randomness, but of worship. The figure did not speak, nor did he move, yet his very presence silenced every question. The angels that filled the sky shimmered like living stars, creating a tapestry of light around him, declaring without words that something divine was underway. After that unforgettable moment, new signs began appearing across the earth. In Kansas, vast cornfields bore intricate geometric spirals overnight, too large, too perfect for human hands. Many believed these were crafted by the angels, marks of their unseen flight. In Florida, luminous symbols appeared in the sands of empty beaches, glowing at night with an unearthly light. Scholars could not trace their meaning, for these were not human inventions, they were heavenly messages. And out in the deserts of Arizona, military-grade radar picked up more evidence, floating, shifting forms that resembled crosses and strange heavenly scripts. These shapes moved with the grace of living beings, angelic sentinels, sent not to frighten, but to awaken. No natural explanation fit. These were not illusions. They were not myths. They were messengers. The world, once quick to dismiss the supernatural, could no longer look away. People moved through their days with a strange quietness, glancing often to the heavens, wondering when the skies would speak again. Then came the eclipse. Scientists had predicted its timing and path down to the minute, but what none had predicted was what would be revealed. At the peak of the eclipse, when the sun was completely hidden, a shape formed in the blackened sky. A cross, perfect and solid, not imagined, not faint, but boldly present. Around it, in patterns too structured for clouds, appeared legions of angels, brilliant beings hovering in formation, their presence felt even by those who could barely see. No trumpet sounded, no thundering voice filled the air. Only the deepest, most profound stillness descended, a silence that hushed cities and countryside alike. Wherever people were, in cars, homes, streets, they stopped and looked up, unable to tear their gaze away. Whatever boundary had once divided the spiritual and the physical had been crossed. The angels weren't symbols anymore. They were real, and they were here. From that moment, it became clear that the world would not, could not, return to what it once was. Something from heaven had broken through, and it was not leaving. Soon after, a strange new headline began to circulate. A private plane, allegedly carrying Donald Trump, had disappeared. Conflicting reports flooded the media, some claiming he was dead, others whispering that it was a staged event, even something ritualistic. Yet amid the confusion, no one could deny the growing sense that these earthly events were connected to the heavenly signs above. Then, as if in response, nature itself turned wild. Fires erupted in places where the ground had already burned, but these flames burned blue, the color of celestial fire. Firefighters watched in disbelief as these unnatural flames danced with eerie intelligence, curving around homes, pausing before igniting again elsewhere. Snowstorms swept through the sun-baked south, shutting down cities that had been roasting under heat waves days before. But by now, people weren't surprised. They were starting to expect the unexpected. The split between believers and skeptics widened into a canyon. Some whispered that the angels were guiding these signs, warning a world too stubborn to repent. Others scoffed, but their voices grew weaker, drowned out by the sheer weight of what was unfolding. In the far reaches of Alaska, far from the eyes of the media, a small weather station caught something astonishing. A light appeared in the night sky, moving sharply, scanning the earth below. It was no meteor, no drone. It moved with intention. Then, in a flash, it shot upwards, so fast that it knocked out power not just at the station, but at nearby military bases too. Communication lines went dead. Satellites blinked out. The skies remained eerily silent, except for the quiet dance of angels high above. Then the world shook. An earthquake struck deep within Japan. Lakes in Central Africa turned a deep, unnatural red overnight. Farmlands in Chile and Romania were found burned with giant symbols, again, the marks of angelic visitations, of warnings made visible to human eyes. All over the globe, ordinary people began to speak, unprompted, unscripted. Their message was simple, yet profound. The delay is over. They weren't shouting, they weren't predicting, they were witnessing. And deep down, those who listened knew they were right. The waiting was over. As the world struggled to process the new reality, attention turned toward a new figure rising in influence. A man not bound by traditional politics or religion. He spoke of peace, of unity, of healing the planet. He rejected old beliefs, dismissing them as outdated relics of fear. His charisma was undeniable, his promises intoxicating to a weary world desperate for hope. But above him, the skies told a different story. The angels remained, watching, waiting, reminding the world that while humanity searched for saviors among themselves, the true battle, the eternal one, had already begun. It started quietly, almost imperceptibly. There were no dramatic decrees or violent overthrows, only subtle shifts cloaked in polished language about safety, modernization, and unity. Policies evolved beneath a surface of normalcy, redrawing legal frameworks to slowly distance society from anything that claimed exclusive truth. Religious texts, once foundational to education, began vanishing from classrooms. No announcement accompanied their removal, only silence and a quiet agreement that progress required it. Sermons that once streamed freely across digital spaces began to vanish, not by overt censorship, but by shadow banning, buried under algorithms that labeled them harmful. Christian voices weren't banned, they were drowned out, reframed as relics of a divisive, outdated era, subtly cast as threats to a new global harmony. The man behind these changes never declared war against the church. He didn't have to. He simply offered something more alluring, a vision of peace without salvation, a morality without repentance, a future where self-actualization replaced the need for divine intervention. And while the world cheered its newfound unity, beneath the surface, something ancient stirred. It was as if an old system, long buried beneath centuries of spiritual warfare, began to breathe once more, not just in ideas, but in culture, in policy, and in the architecture of a rising new world. Cities gleamed with innovation, parliaments buzzed with global cooperation, and yet unseen currents moved deeper still, currents no human power could control. It was then that the skies began to change. Strange phenomena painted the heavens across the earth. In cities where auroras had never been seen, the night skies shimmered with unnatural colors: vibrant greens, blood-red streaks, deep violet swirls. Scientists struggled to explain it, offering theories of solar storms and magnetic disturbances, but their explanations sounded hollow. Over Manhattan one early morning, a storm unleashed a spectacle that shook even the most hardened skeptics. High above the skyline, as thunder rolled, a fiery ring opened in the clouds. Within it, a blazing eye formed, radiating not just light, but an unmistakable presence. Eyewitnesses described it as a living awareness, watching, waiting, and it wasn't alone. Across the world, reports of angelic beings began pouring in. In South America, farmers gazed skyward at brilliant figures clothed in burning white, standing motionless among the stars. In Europe, entire towns witnessed radiant forms soaring over ancient cathedrals, wings outstretched, faces hidden in glory too fierce to behold. In Africa and Asia, crowds knelt in marketplaces as they saw what ancient texts had only hinted at: mighty messengers, beings of light that needed no words to communicate the urgency of heaven. In places of worship, the supernatural intensified. Children's choirs preparing hymns found their voices shifting, not in melody or harmony, but in something deeper. Their songs began to vibrate with a resonance that defied music theory, layered with tones that seemed to ripple through the very air itself. Choir leaders thought it was equipment failure at first, but soon realized the sound was not mechanical. It was spiritual. It was as though an invisible choir had joined them, heavenly voices weaving through the children's praise, merging heaven and earth for fleeting, terrifying moments. And those who listened carefully could hear it: the chorus of angels, rising and falling in tones beyond human capacity, calling the faithful to wakefulness. Meanwhile, a new presence began shaping the global narrative, not through parades or political speeches, but by steering ideologies, influencing laws, and directing the course of nations with terrifying precision. His fingerprints were visible in the synchronization of world currencies, the erasure of moral boundaries across cultures, and the emergence of a singular, chillingly unified code of ethics. Unlike his predecessor, this new figure wasn't charming. He didn't need charisma. He wielded influence that reshaped institutions without a single word broadcast to the masses. His power wasn't seen, it was felt. It hummed through new laws, new technologies, and new protocols that redefined identity itself. New systems rolled out rapidly. Digital IDs replaced passports, credit cards, and healthcare documents. Participation wasn't mandatory until it was. To refuse was to vanish. One by one, dissenters found themselves erased from the digital world. Bank accounts frozen, communication lines severed, public records wiped clean. They didn't die. They were simply gone. And yet, amid the tightening grip, underground movements began to grow. Across shattered villages, bustling metropolises, and hidden corners of suburbia, small gatherings of believers formed. They didn't meet in grandeur or rebellion, but in desperation, a hunger for the truth they could no longer find in the open. These weren't famous pastors or theologians. They were ordinary souls who had lost everything but their faith. They gathered in barns, abandoned warehouses, rooftops under drone surveillance, and secret basements. And there, something astonishing happened. As they prayed, many testified of angelic visitations, not dreams, not imaginations, but vivid encounters. During fervent nights of worship, shimmering beings would appear among them, sometimes unseen, but felt with overwhelming clarity. A hand resting on a shoulder, a sudden peace in the midst of terror, a burst of light when hope was almost lost. Children spoke of angels standing guard outside their homes. Elderly women described luminous figures singing alongside their whispered prayers. Young men saw visions of battles in the heavens, armies of angels clashing against unseen forces determined to extinguish the last remnants of truth. Even in cities drowning in surveillance and propaganda, these gatherings continued to grow, fueled not by anger, but by clarity. Across continents, from deserts to megacities, believers shared strikingly similar dreams and visions. Without consulting one another, they recounted the same messages, the same warnings, the same call: hold fast, the king is coming. Above them, the skies continued to bear witness. Sometimes in storms, sometimes in clear blue, angelic hosts could be glimpsed. Warriors of light, standing vigilant above the cities of men, readying themselves for the final conflict that was no longer far off. The world applauded the unity it believed it had achieved, but a deeper truth had risen underneath, a truth burning fiercely in the hidden places, guarded by the remnant and watched over by the armies of heaven. The presence that had stirred was no longer hidden, and neither were the angels.
Flares, maybe? Maybe. No, they're...
Again and again, one sentence echoed like thunder across the veil of reality. Prepare the way. The king is returning. It wasn't heard by ears alone. It was felt in the marrow of bones, whispered across dreams, and delivered with a spiritual urgency that seemed to pierce time itself. As though coming from another dimension, the message repeated, clear, unrelenting, and holy. The remnant, the few who still watched and waited, trembled as the heavens began to shift. At first, the signs were subtle: whispers of movement in the skies, slight changes in the air, unusual alignments of the stars. But then came the moment no one could deny. Without warning, the moon rose over the western horizon, deep red, soaked in a crimson glow, not like the red of dust or eclipse, but something far more unnatural, as if it had been stained by blood itself. And as it climbed higher into the night sky, people noticed it was not just glowing, it was pulsating, beating like a heart. Telescopes refused to focus, cameras failed to capture it, every lens was distorted. It was as though heaven itself had hidden the moon from mechanical eyes. That's when they appeared, figures in the clouds, radiant and winged, stretching across the firmament. They weren't birds, planes, or drones. They were angels, and they weren't just watching, they were waiting. Their wings shimmered with light not born from the sun, and their forms moved in patterns ancient and sacred. Some hovered motionless, others flew in slow, deliberate circles. Thousands of them, perhaps millions, lined the skies, glowing like burning coals in the upper atmosphere. For the first time in centuries, the separation between heaven and earth thinned. And then the storm began, not of rain or thunder, but of fire and light. Solar flares burst across the surface of the sun, violent and chaotic. Streams of energy broke loose, surging toward Earth at incredible speed. Within hours, satellites were disabled, power grids overloaded, and entire nations were plunged into sudden darkness. The geomagnetic pulses swept across the globe, but the angels remained, undisturbed by the fury, their eyes fixed on Earth like watchers awaiting orders. The storm silenced more than machines. It silenced the very hum of life, not the quiet of peace, but an eerie void, as though some global spiritual frequency had suddenly gone offline. And in that stillness, something awakened, not outside, but within. People across the continents, regardless of language or belief, described the same impossible experience. It was a trumpet, not a sound heard with the ear, but felt in the soul. It didn't vibrate through air, but through the spirit. It was a blast that shattered all inner walls. No one could say where it came from. Some collapsed in tears, others in awe. The veil between the physical and the spiritual world was torn open. There was no ambiguity anymore. Heaven and earth had collided. The angels descended lower now, closer to Earth's surface, visible to those whose eyes had been opened. Some stood over cities, arms extended as though guarding the souls within. Others wept, radiant tears falling like dew on scorched ground. They sang, not with mouths, but with light, and their songs stirred the winds and the water. Then came the event that defied all comprehension. In the deserts of Nevada, a small town simply vanished. One moment it was there, homes, streets, lights. The next, it was gone. No fire, no explosion, just dust, just silence. Satellite images confirmed it. Dusk revealed a town. Dawn revealed nothing but bare earth. Those in nearby counties spoke of lights in the trees, pathways buzzing with static, and voices in the wind, speaking ancient languages their hearts somehow understood. The locals didn't dare approach the site. They felt watched, not by drones, but by heavenly sentinels. Reports came from other parts of the world too. In the skies over Jerusalem, a host of angels formed a circle, wings spread wide, their bodies blazing with golden fire. In the Amazon, tribes described luminous beings descending over rivers, not harming the land, but purifying it. In the Arctic, auroras danced in unnatural patterns, symbols that mirrored visions described in Revelation and Daniel. The natural world had begun to respond to something unnatural, something divine. Rivers changed course. Animals migrated in reverse. Mountains trembled, not from tectonic pressure, but as if they too were reverent. And through it all, the skies remained crowded with angelic beings, moving with holy purpose. For those with discernment, the truth became undeniable. This was not the weather. This was not a political ploy. This was not climate. This was the judgment of God, not metaphorical, not future. Now and yet, within the judgment, there was mercy. For those whose hearts remained open, the presence of the angels brought peace amidst the shaking. Some spoke of miraculous healings, others of words of knowledge whispered directly into their minds. Entire families fell to their knees in worship, no longer questioning the divine, but surrendering to it. The trumpet blast had awakened them, and the angels had confirmed it. The king was returning. This was no longer a time for interpretation or delay. The warnings were over. The signs were no longer coded. They were embodied. The time for sermons had passed. Now was the time for response. And in the trembling hearts of the remnant, the message rang clearer than ever before. The skies had opened. The spiritual realm had descended. The angels were not symbols. They were messengers, soldiers, witnesses. And with wings spread across the heavens, they cried with one voice, not in fear, but in joy and awe. Prepare the way. The king is returning.
Tonight, the image is still coming in after that strong earthquake hit Southern California. A 5.2 magnitude quake near San Diego. Warnings.
Cameras catching the tremor. Watch as it shakes this baby awake. Everyone's okay.
California has been shaking more and more frequently. Month after month, the earthquakes grow stronger. But what's truly unsettling isn't just the trembling ground. It's the strange signs that come with it. Some witnesses claim they've seen mysterious lights tearing across the sky, while others go even further, saying they saw what looked like angels flying above just moments before the earth began to quake. Could this be more than just natural disaster? Could it be a spiritual warning, a message from a higher realm? Scientists are now sounding the alarm. A massive earthquake may be building beneath California, possibly the strongest in history, putting nearly 39 million lives at risk. And as the world watches America's economy and weather patterns, could something greater be unfolding? A divine shaking? Will the big one strike this month, next, or very soon? And are these angelic sightings and bizarre events a sign that something far greater is on the horizon?
Although many have heard the sound, no one can seem to explain the source.
As earthquakes continue to rattle California with increasing frequency and strength, many residents have begun reporting strange and unexplainable occurrences, events that seem to defy science. Among the most mysterious is the repeated sighting of what some claim to be angels flying across the sky just before the ground begins to shake. One woman near Ridgecrest described being awakened by a blinding light outside her window. When she looked up, she saw a glowing figure with wings, gliding silently across the sky. It looked just like an angel, she said, radiant, majestic. And seconds after it disappeared, the earthquake struck. In another video circulating online, a bright, human-shaped light appears in the night sky, moving smoothly with what seem like large wings of light. The person filming insists it wasn't a plane or a shooting star, but something divine. These sightings have been reported in multiple areas: San Bernardino, Bakersfield, even near the Sierra Nevada mountains. Some witnesses describe hearing heavenly singing or a deep vibration in the air, moments before the tremors begin. A few said it felt like a spiritual presence blanketing the sky, something otherworldly and peaceful, yet awe-inspiring. This is no longer just a single event. It's becoming a pattern, a repeated sign linked with natural disasters. Spiritual researchers and even some religious leaders are beginning to ask, could these be messengers from heaven? Are we being warned? A rabbi in Los Angeles recently stated, according to Scripture, angels often appear before great events, either as protectors or as warnings. These signs may be calling humanity to wake up before something bigger comes. Skeptics point to weather phenomena or illusions, but witnesses describe a divine feeling, a moment of stillness and power that science can't explain. And so, the question remains, are these angels warning us of something? A great shaking, a spiritual shift, or the beginning of something prophetic? Whatever the answer, one thing is clear: something is happening in the skies above America, and if these truly are heavenly messengers, then the world must listen, repent, and prepare for what lies ahead. After videos and eyewitness reports about angels flying in the sky before recent California earthquakes went viral, social media exploded with heated debate. While some viewers saw these sightings as divine warnings, others dismissed them as illusions or misinterpretations.
I truly believe what people are seeing are angels. In the Bible, heavenly beings appeared before great events. This feels like a spiritual wake-up call. I watched the video 3 times. That light moved like nothing I've ever seen. I believe it was a sign. Something bigger is coming. Come on, people. It's probably a drone or a weather balloon. Don't jump to angel every time something weird happens. This is classic mass hysteria. Lights in the sky don't mean the end of the world. Let's stick with facts.
In the days leading up to the disaster, the skies over remote mountain ranges took on an eerie, almost supernatural quality. Swirling cloud formations appeared, spinning unnaturally with colors that defied logic: green, violet, and electric blue, like something torn from a dream or a surrealist painting. Hikers who witnessed these phenomena reported a strange hum beneath their feet, a low, steady vibration that didn't register on any seismograph, but sent a chill through their bones. They didn't know it yet, but they were standing on the threshold of something far beyond human understanding. Overnight, water levels in wells and coastal inlets shifted dramatically. Tides surged without warning, then receded, revealing dry ground long claimed by the sea. In neighborhoods across the country, pets began acting erratically. Dogs barked at empty spaces, howling through the night and scratching frantically at doors, desperate to stay inside. Cats hid beneath furniture, arching their backs as if they sensed a presence humans couldn't perceive. In the countryside, ranchers awoke to find their cattle and sheep huddled tightly in perfect circles, frozen with fear and refusing to move. It was as though something unseen had passed through the land, leaving only dread in its wake. Local pastors began to speak quietly of signs in the heavens, warnings that aligned with ancient scripture. And then came the dreams. People from different states, strangers to one another, took to social media to share terrifyingly similar nightmares. They dreamed of the ground splitting open, of trumpet-like blasts echoing through the sky, and of dark figures standing silently at the edge of the ocean, staring into the horizon. The imagery was so specific, so consistent, that it couldn't be coincidence. It felt more like a message, implanted simultaneously into the minds of hundreds by some unseen force. But there was something else. Witnesses across mountainous regions claimed to have seen angels, real, radiant beings soaring through the sky. Not wisps of light or hallucinations, but fully formed creatures with massive golden wings and brilliant auras that lit up the heavens. These angels made no sound, gave no command. They simply hovered, watching, waiting, as if guarding a divine secret or marking a sacred moment in time. Then came the global shock. The Panama Canal, an essential artery of world commerce carrying over 14,000 ships each year, was suddenly shut down. Social media erupted with reports that the U.S. had sealed off the canal following a mysterious discovery during a routine Navy dive. A leaked image hinted at something massive buried beneath the murky waters, something not made by man, nor resembling any known natural formation. The U.S. government offered no comment, but former President Trump stunned the world by declaring that America might reclaim the canal for national security reasons. China expressed outrage, Panama demanded answers, and global trade markets spiraled into chaos. Cryptic posts from Elon Musk only fueled the speculation, hinting at something far older than any civilization we know. Conspiracy theories flourished. Some believed the military had triggered a hidden gateway, an interdimensional rift long dormant beneath the Earth's crust. Others pointed to prophecies about ancient beings buried beneath the oceans, waiting for humanity's arrogance to disturb their rest. Scientists speculated about deep Earth resonance, frequencies rising from the planet's core, perhaps signaling a massive awakening. And always, there were the angels. In rural hilltops, people gathered for prayer, their faces turned to the sky. Choirs formed spontaneously, singing hymns under the open heavens. There, high above, the angels returned, more numerous now, wings outstretched, their golden light casting long shadows across the land. Some witnesses claimed to hear celestial trumpets, long, mournful notes that seemed to echo from beyond the stars. Not everyone believed. Skeptics mocked what they called mass hysteria. But for those who had felt the hum in the ground, seen the swirling skies, heard the cries of their animals, and shared the same dreams as strangers, they knew something had shifted. Something ancient, divine, and unstoppable was drawing near. What truly lies beneath the waters of the Panama Canal? Have we unearthed a sleeping power, a divine gate, or a forgotten curse? Is this the beginning of a new era, or the last warning before the end? As the world holds its breath, the dreams continue. The angels still soar across the skies, their presence a radiant testimony to a moment unlike any other. And the earth keeps trembling, softly, steadily, like the heartbeat of something far greater than we can comprehend. One truth remains: humanity has entered a moment of reckoning, caught between belief and disbelief, between revelation and ruin. And above it all, the skies blaze with the light of countless angels, silently reminding us we were warned. The warnings were clear, but few had eyes to see or ears to hear. As the angels continued to appear, silent, glowing, unshakably present, some mocked while others trembled. In the cities, people stood on rooftops pointing skyward, their cell phones capturing shaky footage of celestial beings suspended in midair. Though the images were often blurry, overexposed by the radiance of the angel's wings, the reports were too consistent to ignore. From the Rocky Mountains to the forests of Norway, from the Andes to the outskirts of Jerusalem, witnesses described the same vision: divine messengers, their wings outstretched, cloaked in light not of this world. Even atheists and agnostics found themselves stunned into silence. News stations hesitated to cover the story, afraid of backlash, afraid of ridicule, and more than anything, afraid that it might actually be real. But underground forums, live streams, and encrypted channels flooded with videos, testimonies, and pleas for answers. And still, the Panama Canal remained closed. Global trade slowed to a crawl. Oil tankers lined the ocean, waiting for clearance that never came. Satellites hovering above the region captured glimpses of massive circular patterns beneath the canal's waters, etched into the earth like some ancient sigil. The U.S. Navy denied all requests for comment. Rumors leaked that submarines had picked up strange, low-frequency sounds, groaning, rhythmic, almost like breath, from the canal's depths. In churches, congregations wept openly. Pastors flipped through the pages of Revelation, Ezekiel, and Daniel, their voices trembling as they read aloud passages that seemed torn from the headlines. Trumpet blasts, angelic hosts, waters parting, and seals being broken. Every word now seemed less symbolic and more terrifyingly literal. And then came the shaking. What began as a faint vibration beneath the Panama Canal suddenly intensified. The waters surged upward, not as waves, but as if pushed by something beneath, something vast and rising. Emergency sirens wailed as drones captured a blinding light bursting through the surface, accompanied by what sounded like thousands of trumpets echoing from the very heart of the earth. All across the world, people dropped to their knees, not out of panic, but awe. Even the sky seemed to change. The stars grew brighter, more ordered, as if constellations themselves were aligning to witness something unprecedented. The moon, once pale and passive, turned blood red, then silver, then began to glow with a golden light that cast shadows upon the ground. The atmosphere shimmered. Time felt slower, heavier, almost sacred. Atop the tallest peaks, more angels appeared. Hundreds now, then thousands, descending in disciplined silence. Some hovered just above the earth, wings curled around them like cloaks of fire. Others stood tall, gazing toward the horizon where ocean met sky. One by one, they began to chant, not in any earthly language, but in a sound that resonated deep in the soul, vibrating in the bones. People described the experience as a song made of light. Tears streamed from their eyes, even if they did not understand the words. It was not terror, it was holiness. In the cities, people who had never set foot in a church began to pray. In deserts, shamans and monks bowed low in reverence. In homes and hospitals, the sick suddenly sat up, breathing freely for the first time in months. A baby born premature in New York began to cry just as the chanting reached its peak. In Tokyo, an elderly man blind since birth claimed to see the sky ablaze with wings. "The heavens have opened," he whispered. And somewhere, deep within the sealed Panama Canal, something stirred. Government leaders were reportedly evacuated from embassies across Panama. Unverified footage showed strange, obsidian-like shards being lifted from the canal's depths by robotic cranes, surrounded by soldiers in biohazard suits. Some claimed these were fragments of a door, not mechanical, but organic, pulsing like a heart. Across digital networks, another theory gained traction, that the canal had always been built over something ancient, perhaps the remnants of the Nephilim, the fallen ones mentioned in Genesis 6. Scholars posted ancient Sumerian texts that seemed to describe a vein of the world hidden beneath a waterway connecting two oceans, a place guarded by watchers who would awaken in the end of days. More footage emerged. A diver, mask fogged, whispering in shaky voice, "It's not man-made, it's alive." The video cut out after a burst of static. That was the last any of the world saw from inside the canal. And then came silence. For one full day, no data left the Panama region. No flights entered. All satellites were mysteriously redirected. It was as if that entire part of the world had fallen under a divine blackout. Whispers of angelic beings standing guard over the canal, bodies of pure fire and light, wings outstretched from shore to shore, spread across encrypted messages between international military leaders. The next morning, the silence broke, with a sound no one could ever forget. It wasn't a sound heard by ears. It was a sound that split the sky, echoed in the marrow of every living being on the planet. A sound like a trumpet, a roar, a word unspoken but fully understood. It wasn't spoken in English or Hebrew or Latin, yet every soul recognized it. Prepare. All around the globe, children woke from sleep crying. Animals wailed. Electronics flickered and died. And people, millions of them, knelt in the streets, on mountaintops, in grocery stores, in prisons and palaces alike, overcome by something greater than fear, the certainty that heaven had broken through. And the angels continued to descend. Over Jerusalem, over Rome, over Cairo and São Paulo, hosts of radiant beings hovered, eyes like burning sapphire, robes like woven lightning. And behind them, faint at first, then unmistakable, a shape began to take form in the heavens. A door, vast and golden, slowly opening. Light poured through, brighter than the sun but gentle to the eyes. From within, that light came a voice, not thunderous, but full of authority and sorrow. It called to the hearts of all men and women, saints and skeptics alike. "You were warned, return to me." It was the voice of mercy and judgment. And so began the great turning. Millions fell to their knees, confessing sins, weeping, embracing strangers. Families reunited, addicts found sudden deliverance. Wars halted as soldiers dropped their weapons and lifted their hands toward the sky. The world stood still for one sacred breath of time on the edge of something holy. But not all believed. Some resisted. Some mocked louder than before. They launched missiles at the sky, missiles that turned to flowers in midair and fell harmlessly to the ground. Others called the angels invaders, demanded proof, threatened violence. But the angels did not strike. They watched. They waited. Because it wasn't yet the end. It was the beginning of a final choice. Back in Panama, reports emerged of a great structure now revealed in the heart of the canal, an ancient altar covered in languages long dead, glowing with inscriptions that seemed to pulse with life. Above it, a sword floated, massive, suspended mid-air, burning with holy fire. The U.S. military had encircled the region, but none dared approach. Those who did, it was said, were either struck blind or fell on their faces in uncontrollable weeping. The media tried to spin it. Politicians tried to control it. But the people knew. This was not politics. This was not war. This was prophecy. And the angels kept coming. Over Africa, their wings beat softly like 1,000 drums. Over Asia, they stood guard over sacred temples. Over the oceans, they walked on water, hands raised toward the heavens. And all around the world, one question burned in every heart. What happens next? Some say the sword above the Panama Canal is a sign, a final key that will only descend when humanity makes its collective choice. Others say the dreams have grown more vivid, now showing a great light descending from the open sky, and a figure robed in white standing with arms wide open. And above it all, a single truth echoes louder than ever before. We are not alone. We have never been alone.
This eerie scene is giving them apocalypse anxiety, Joe.
An unimaginable catastrophe had taken hold of the southern United States. Cities once bustling with life, Dallas, Houston, Atlanta, and even the heat-scorched plains of Phoenix, were not blanketed by ordinary dark clouds, but something far more terrifying. It wasn't weather. It wasn't war. It was a living shadow, an abyssal force that moved like a sentient fog, devouring streets, homes, and everything in its path. People stared upward, stunned. The skies didn't turn gray with storms or blue with calm. Instead, a deep, blood-red hue crept across the heavens, bathing everything beneath in a surreal, terrifying light. At first, there was panic. Then, an eerie stillness descended. Not a peaceful quiet, but a silence so heavy it clung to the soul. It felt as though time itself held its breath. The air was thick with dread, and just when it seemed things couldn't grow stranger, the skies began to cry out. For days leading up to the red skies, there had been reports, sporadic at first, then increasing, of strange trumpet-like sounds echoing from above. These weren't faint or momentary blasts. They were deep, resonant tones that reverberated across entire cities, lasting as long as 20 minutes. Witnesses described the sounds as otherworldly, like a great horn groaning in the heavens. They didn't just hear it, they felt it in their bones. These were not natural phenomena. It was as if creation itself was mourning or warning. And then, nature retaliated. Storms of unprecedented fury descended upon the nation. Meteorologists, typically stoic in the face of chaos, were at a loss. These weren't just powerful hurricanes or freak blizzards. They were chaotic, hybrid weather systems that defied classification. Storms struck without warning, pounding communities with winds that tore apart infrastructure and rains that flooded entire counties in hours. Lightning split the skies in jagged webs, touching down in bursts of blue fire. The nation's emergency systems were overwhelmed, and families huddled in basements, unsure if the next moment would be their last. As the first wave of fear settled into numbness, a second sign emerged. The blood-red sky began to glow, not with sunlight, but with lights. Not stars, not aircraft, but radiant pulses of gold and violet that moved with clear intention. They flickered and danced through the clouds like they were alive, shifting in rhythmic patterns, as if spelling out a language no one could decipher. Radar systems picked up nothing. Telescopes showed only distortions. Scientists were baffled. "It's not physical," one shaken astronomer confessed on live television. "It's intentional." That word, intentional, struck a chord across the country. It wasn't just a natural disaster, it was a message. But from who? Or what? While the public grasped at answers, tragedy struck again, this time from the sky. In Washington, D.C., a presidential helicopter carrying 67 passengers, including key government officials, plummeted from the sky with no warning. No engine failure, no external strike. It simply fell like a stone. President Trump somberly addressed the nation, confirming that there were no survivors. The horror didn't stop there. The next day, a medical aircraft exploded mid-air above Philadelphia, claiming the lives of a mother and her child, among others. The day after, a commercial jet vanished over Alaskan airspace. No signal, no wreckage, just silence. Suddenly, air travel felt like suicide. As the skies rebelled, so did the earth. California, long accustomed to wildfires, was overtaken by something unnatural. Not fire, but infernos, living towers of flame that twisted against the wind and floated like specters across hills and forests. Firefighters reported seeing floating blue fireballs hanging in trees, watching them. Some left their posts, terrified. "This fire, it's alive. It's watching us," one veteran firefighter whispered into a news mic before disappearing. On the East Coast, a different nightmare unfolded. Florida, Georgia, and Alabama were struck by freak snowstorms. Highways turned into ice rinks overnight. Cars, homes, and even entire towns were buried in thick layers of snow. But what terrified people most wasn't the cold, it was the sound beneath it. A deep, grinding metallic moan echoed through the ground. It felt like the planet itself was groaning. Then, the shadows came. Silhouettes, tall, humanoid figures, began to appear in the snow. Not fully visible, always distant, they vanished the moment anyone tried to approach. But they were there, watching, waiting. Whatever force had taken hold of the elements was not of this world. It didn't want to destroy, it wanted to speak. But humanity wasn't listening. Then, one final, impossible moment shattered everything. In the quiet of a frozen night in Oklahoma, the heavens opened. A light descended, not like a spotlight, but something ethereal, filled with majesty and holiness. It wasn't aircraft or illusion. It was beyond comprehension. And then came the sound, a trumpet, but not of brass or man-made metal. This one sang of sorrow and power. It pulsed through buildings, through hearts, and into the soul. Dogs howled, trees stopped moving. Time itself seemed to pause. Marie Thompson, a local woman, described it tearfully. The sky wasn't just crying, it was pleading with us, begging us to listen. And then, he appeared. Above the Oklahoma sky stood a figure radiant with celestial light. It wasn't a vague shape. It was Jesus Christ, not in statue or dream, but in glory. Glorious, unmistakable, surrounded by brilliant rays of divine brilliance. People fell to their knees. Phones recorded. Social media exploded. An elderly man named Robert Hastings sobbed, "I thought I was too old to witness miracles. But I saw him. I saw Jesus." The government moved quickly to suppress the footage. Major media outlets fell silent. But it was too late. Millions had seen. Hundreds of thousands had recorded it. The truth could no longer be buried. And as the world reeled from this revelation, a final phenomenon began. A thick, metallic fog began rolling into cities. Visibility dropped within seconds. It smelled like burning iron. Within it echoed the same trumpet cries, deep, soulful, reverent. And moving within the mist were black triangular shapes, silent, menacing. Drones, ships, angels, no one knew. But their presence silenced entire cities. People stayed indoors, prayed, and waited. Something beyond nature had arrived, not to conquer, but to awaken. The question now wasn't what was happening. It was why, and whether it was too late to respond.
Flares, maybe? Maybe. No, they're...
It all began with the Watchers, mysterious figures captured on school surveillance cameras. They stood still, silent, and unrecognized. No government claimed responsibility for their presence. No nation issued a statement. They simply appeared and observed. Their existence was undeniable, yet entirely unexplained. The world watched, puzzled, and unnerved. Who were they? Why were they here? No answers came. Then came the symbols. First, strange geometric shapes emerged on meteorological radar systems, bizarre formations that no expert could interpret. These weren't natural weather patterns or technical glitches. They were deliberate, calculated, almost intelligent. Before long, these same cryptic symbols began appearing in open fields, etched deep into the soil with a precision that defied human ability. They resembled ancient runes mixed with futuristic design, beyond the grasp of any known culture or language. But it didn't stop there. A red tide washed up along the coast of Myrtle Beach. Scientists quickly attributed it to a bloom of algae, a common enough occurrence. But this tide was different. The sand beneath it was marked with the same mysterious symbols. Even more disturbing, these etchings glowed faintly under the moonlight, as though pulsing with life. Experts debated, but the public wasn't fooled. The people didn't see algae. They saw blood. This wasn't just an ecological event. It was a sign, a judgment, a divine warning. Amid this rising sense of dread, the world began to fracture. The Middle East ignited once again, with conflict erupting between Israel and Gaza. Tensions, long simmering, reached a breaking point. Missiles lit up the night sky like blazing arrows of the apocalypse, their trails slicing through the heavens. Children's screams echoed through shattered streets as cities crumbled into dust. The world could only watch, paralyzed, silent, helpless. Then came the vision. During a partial solar eclipse over the United States, an event that coincided eerily with a sacred biblical holiday, a blinding cross of light appeared in the sky. It hovered there for only a few minutes, yet it pierced hearts like a sword. Some dropped to their knees, overwhelmed with awe. Others ran in fear, believing the veil between heaven and earth had just been torn. Scientists rushed to explain it away, atmospheric optics, rare coincidences, reflections, but their words fell flat. What they could not explain was the perfect alignment, the eclipse, the holy day, and the cross of light in the sky. It was too precise, too meaningful. Then the earth began to tremble. A wave of earthquakes rippled across the region, shaking buildings and toppling confidence. The sense of urgency grew. It was as if the earth itself groaned beneath the weight of something far greater than natural forces. Something prophetic was unfolding, yet many remained spiritually asleep. In the midst of the chaos, a name re-emerged from the shadows: Trump. Following a tragic and mysterious air disaster, rumors began to swirl about his fate. Was he truly gone? Or had he vanished, awaiting a moment of divine revelation? Whispers turned into wildfire. Some believed his death was no accident, but rather a sacrifice, part of a larger, hidden design, a prophecy in motion. Meanwhile, the United States descended into turmoil. Floods submerged cities. Wildfires consumed forests. Snowstorms blanketed the South in record-breaking waves of out-of-season blizzards. The skies took on a strange hue, deep red, as though stained with the blood of judgment. Even the animals sensed it. Birds circled endlessly above city skylines. Whales began beaching themselves in massive numbers. In one eerie moment, flocks of birds froze mid-flight, suspended as if caught between dimensions. Nature was responding to something bigger than us. Then, Alaska bore witness to a terrifying new sign. Security cameras at a remote research facility captured a streak of brilliant light tearing across the sky. But this was no meteor. It changed direction mid-flight. It pulsed with energy. It was alive, intelligent. A moment later, a thunderous boom shattered the silence, followed by complete system failure. Satellites tumbled from orbit. Military communications were wiped out for hours. And the official explanation? Silence. In that silence, voices began to rise. Spiritual leaders, pastors, and prophets. They spoke of visions and dreams filled with fire and divine warning. A unified message rang out across continents. Prepare yourselves. Time is up. Among the first to speak boldly was Pastor Sarah Delroy of Houston. These are not natural disasters, she declared. These are judgments. The heavens are weeping. God is speaking. But are we listening? The world was divided. Some mocked. Some awakened. Most remained indifferent, numb, apathetic, lost in the lull of routine while the heavens cried out. Then, the blood moon returned. Prophets had long warned of this celestial event, declaring that this particular blood moon, unlike any in decades, would align with the biblical Feast of Trumpets. Another coincidence? Or a deliberate divine synchronization? As the red orb rose in the night sky, hearts across the world pounded in anticipation, fear, and wonder. Mary Thompson, a quiet woman from Oklahoma who had once shared a haunting dream of divine warning, received another. In it, she saw waters parting like the Red Sea, but what lay beyond wasn't safety. It was fire. an endless sea of flame. A crowd stood at the edge, paralyzed with indecision, unsure whether to step forward or retreat. She awoke in a panic, crying out, "Time's up! Choose now." And maybe that was the message the whole world needed to hear. Time was no longer a luxury. Lukewarm faith could no longer hold. The signs were everywhere. The sky, the earth, the animals, even our dreams, all shouting for our attention. We were standing at the precipice of something unprecedented. A global revelation. A reckoning. The third trumpet had sounded, not in the heavens, but within the hearts and minds of those who were spiritually awake. They could see the pattern, the connection between disasters, celestial signs, and the rising tide of unrest. The watchers, the red tide, the symbols, the cross of light, the unnatural silence, they weren't random. They were coordinated, intentional, divine. And now, the world stood on the edge of decision. Wake up or remain asleep. Step into the fire or retreat into the illusion of safety. Either way, the time to choose had arrived. There was no going back.
They are literally over everywhere. There are so many hovering right now over Lake Ray Hubbard. Look at that. Look at that.
Phenomena once dismissed as mere coincidence began to multiply. Mysterious disappearances, unexplainable lights in the sky, and unnatural disasters. All signs seemed to converge, pointing towards something larger, an intricate cosmic design. A plan was in motion, beyond human understanding, unfolding quietly and invisibly across the globe. In this strange and turbulent time, a figure began to emerge, not one of flesh and bone, but of presence and influence. It had no name, no face, yet its shadow was unmistakable. Its movements were subtle, weaving through governments, technologies, and ideologies, distorting truth and morality. The Bible spoke of him as the son of perdition. Others whispered another name, the Antichrist. Globally, events began to fall into alignment. Laws were passed under the guise of progress, but they quietly chipped away at religious freedom. Christian symbols were removed from public spaces and schools. Crosses came down. Prayers were silenced. On social media, verses from the Bible and messages of faith were censored or banned entirely. The justification was always the same: tolerance. But the tolerance was selective. Lies were celebrated, while truth was muted. At the same time, a new public figure captivated the world. He was young, charismatic, and brilliant. A tech mogul turned global peace advocate. His voice was magnetic, his ideas revolutionary. He spoke of unity, science, and progress. He brokered peace treaties, ended conflicts, and inspired millions. But there was something missing in his message. He rejected moral absolutes. Good and evil, right and wrong, he claimed, were outdated concepts. During a globally televised summit on humanity's future, he made a chilling declaration. The problem with the world is dogmatic religion. The future needs a new paradigm, a new man, a new faith, a new order. The crowd erupted in applause. Millions cheered. Few paused to consider the implications. Then, something extraordinary happened. During a live United Nations broadcast, an aurora borealis inexplicably appeared over New York City, an event impossible at that latitude. Swirling lights of green, gold, and violet danced across the sky. At the center, a fiery eye formed, watching, alive. It lasted only 5 seconds, yet it left an indelible mark on all who saw it. Dozens captured it on their phones, but every image vanished mysteriously moments later. The official explanation? A technical glitch. But the witnesses knew what they saw. That same night, Japan was rocked by the deadliest earthquake in 50 years, killing over 300 people. Half a world away, a sacred ancient lake turned blood red overnight. On its shore, an inscription appeared, undecipherable, yet deeply disturbing. Those who beheld the lake felt a profound spiritual dread. The message was clear. Something was very wrong. The world wasn't just unraveling physically, it was collapsing morally. Chaos had become the new normal. Civil wars erupted, families fractured, cities lived in constant fear. Yet despite all this, many refused to see the true nature of the crisis. But not Sarah Delroy. Despite her church being vandalized, twice she continued to preach. "What we're facing isn't political," she declared. "It's spiritual. This is a war for souls. The kingdom of darkness is revealing itself, and still many remain asleep." Above, the signs continued. Over the Mediterranean Sea, dozens of orbs of light moved in complex, purposeful patterns, communicating in a celestial language no human could decipher. Satellites tried to capture the event, but failed. Military officials observed but publicly denied the incident. Prophets, however, understood. These were watchers, sentinels, assigned to observe humanity in its darkest hour. Then, whispers about Donald Trump resurfaced, not about politics, but prophecy. Rumors spread that he hadn't died, as many believed, but had vanished into the shadows, waiting for the precise moment when the world, desperate for leadership, would welcome him back. But if he returned, he would not be the same. He would be changed. Some said transformed. Others speculated he would return not as a leader of nations, but as a judge.